So here we have some Chapter 1 practice problems, and none of them contain any calculations because this chapter really doesn't have calculations. It's all concept. And so let's just look at the first one. This is a true-false question, even though it doesn't tell you that. If it just looks like this with no multiple choice, it's true-false. So the chairman of the board must also be the CEO. And that one is false. It's not, sometimes the CEO can also be the chairman of the board, but it's not like a given. A lot of companies have different chairmen of the board. And then we have most students' favorite type of question, question 2, which of the following statements is correct? And so if we look at the first one, it says a hostile takeover is the main method of transferring ownership interest in a corporation. And the main method of transferring, so the problem is with this transferring ownership, the main method for doing that is to use stock. So it's not this one. That one's false. So we're looking for the statement that's true. B says a corporation is a legal entity created by a state and it has a life and existence that is separate from the lives and existence of its owners and managers. And that one actually is true. So that's the answer for this one. And so let's look at the other ones to see why they are false. So C says unlimited liability and limited life are two key advantages of the corporate form over other forms of business organization. So there's actually, in this, for the corporate form, there's no limited liability and an unlimited life. So when they said unlimited liability here and a limited life, those two parts were the incorrect parts. So just remember they have a limited liability and they have an unlimited life. And then D says limited liability is an advantage of the corporate form of organization to its owners, stockholders, but corporations have more trouble raising money in financial markets because of the complexity of this form of organization. So actually, this part right here is incorrect. They don't have more trouble raising money. That's much easier to raise money once you become a corporation. It's much harder for partnerships and individuals trying to raise money from other people. And then E, although the stockholders of the corporation are insulated by limited legal liability, the legal status of the corporation does not protect the firm's managers in the same way. For example, bondholders can sue the firm's managers if the firm defaults on its debt. So this last part right here is incorrect. Managers are protected too. They can't be sued if in the case of defaulting on its debt. If they do something illegal, then they can be sued or go to jail. And then question 3, another which of the following statements is correct? Letter A says in a typical partnership, liability for other partners' misdeeds is limited to the amount of a particular partner's investment in the business. And this one is false. Actually, they have unlimited liability. So they can be sued for their cars and their homes and things like that. And then B, in a limited partnership, the limited partners have voting control, while the general partner has operating control over the business. And the limited partners are individually responsible on a pro rata basis for the firm's debts in the event of a bankruptcy. So in this case, the part that's incorrect is that they do not have responsibility for the firm's debts. They have limited liability. So that's the part that's incorrect. And then if we look at C, a slow growth company with little need for new capital would be more likely to organize as a corporation than would a faster growing company. Well, it's actually the case that a fast growing company is more likely to become a corporation. So you could probably, it's not more likely, it would be less likely to make this true. And then letter D says partnerships have more difficulty attracting large amounts of capital than corporations, which we know is true, because of such factors as unlimited liability, the need to reorganize when a partner dies, and the illiquidity, difficulty buying and selling of partnership interests. Well, that one actually is a true statement, so the answer is D. And then if we look at E, a major disadvantage of a partnership relative to a corporation is the fact that federal income taxes must be paid by the partners rather than by the firm itself. So the part that's incorrect is not, this is not a major disadvantage. That's not the major disadvantage. The major disadvantage is unlimited liability, because that's the scariest one. And then question 4 is true false. In order to maximize its shareholders' value, a firm's management must attempt to maximize the expected earnings per share. And that's false. It's not supposed to be the expected earnings per share, but to maximize the stock price. And then if we go down to question 5, in order to maximize its shareholders' value, a firm's management must attempt to maximize the stock price in the long run, or the stock's intrinsic value. And that is true. That's what we want the firm's management to do. And then question 6. The primary operating goal of a publicly owned firm trying to best serve its stockholders should be to, let's look at A, maximize managers' own interests, which are by definition consistent with maximizing shareholders' wealth. Well, if you maximize managers' interests, that will cause them to make value destroying actions for the company. So it's not A. Maximize the firm's expected earnings per share, which must also maximize the firm's price per share. That one's not true. We know they shouldn't maximize EPS, earnings per share, but they should maximize the firm's stock price. And it's not always the case that if you do maximize the earnings per share, that would maximize the firm's price per share. So it's not B. And then C, minimize the firm's risks because most stockholders dislike risk. In turn, this will maximize the firm's stock price. Well, it's not that one. Most stockholders want the firm to take on more risk because they benefit in the form of getting increased dividends and increases in the price of stock. So that one's not the answer. And then D, use a well-structured managerial compensation package to reduce conflicts that may exist between stockholders and managers. That is correct. That is exactly what we want a publicly owned firm to do. And then E, since it is impossible to measure a stock's intrinsic value, the text states that it is better for managers to attempt to maximize the current stock price than its intrinsic value. And that's not true. It's not impossible to measure a stock's intrinsic value. We can do that. So we can measure a stock's intrinsic value, and we don't want them to maximize the current stock price over its intrinsic value, because the intrinsic value is a long run value that they're aiming for. So we want them to attempt, if they maximize the current stock price, then they could hurt the company in the long run. And so that one's not correct.